forced to concede one thing. The Obama agenda has unquestionably created jobs. It's created a new governor in Virginia, a new governor in New Jersey, a new senator in Massachusetts, and 60 new members of Congress and 6 new U.S. senators. And so I will actually pause for a moment to offer a toast of our iced teas to the man who has elected more Republicans than anyone else in modern history, President Barack Obama. So we're seeing a great awakening. What do we do about it? How do we keep this going? 4 things. 4 concrete steps we can do to keep this going. Number 1, stand for principle. A big part of why Barack Obama got elected is that Republicans had lost their way. Republicans had stopped standing for principle. As a party, many of our leaders had gotten fat and happy, and the difference between the 2 parties seemed to be disappearing before our very eyes. You know, I have always believed that as Texans, we have a special responsibility to lead. That this state has been blessed in such abundance, both in terms of resources, but most fundamentally in terms of people. In terms of people that understand the values of freedom and the frontier mentality that make Texas and America great. I had the honor of serving 5.5 years as the Solicitor General of Texas. Now, the first question everyone asks, what on earth is a Solicitor General? Which is a very good question. The Solicitor General is the chief lawyer for the state of Texas in front of the United States Supreme Court and all the state and federal appellate courts. I was appointed by my dear friend, Attorney General Greg Abbott, a tremendously principled leader we have leading this state. And I served with General Abbott for 5.5 years, during which time Texas, over and over again, led the nation standing up and fighting for conservative values. We defended the 10 Commandments monument that stands on the state capitol grounds. We took it to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we won 5-4. We defended the Pledge of Allegiance, which all of us began today by reciting. When the Federal Court of Appeals in California had struck it down because it included the words, "one nation under God," Texas brought together all 50 states. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we won unanimously. Another issue, and one that I know no one in this room cares about, the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. We defended the Second Amendment. We brought together 32 states in defense of the individual right to keep and bear arms. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we won 5-4. And in a case that I actually think is the most significant of all the cases we litigated, a case called Medellin versus Texas. In Medellin, the World Court, which is the judicial arm of the United Nations, issued an order to the United States to reopen the convictions of 51 murderers across this country. It's the first time in the history of our nation a foreign court has ever tried to bind the U.S. justice system. Texas stood up and fought the World Court, fought the United Nations. We took it to the U.S. Supreme Court. When I argued the case in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, on the other side were over 90 nations all throughout the world, and on the other side was the President of the United States. We defended U.S. sovereignty, which is what that case was all about, and we won 6-3. These are fights that keep coming and coming, but Texans have stood for principle, and if we want to keep this awakening going, if we want to stop what President Obama is trying to do, we have to, number 1, stand for principle. Number 2, defend liberty. You know, it's very interesting. You see all the pundits that try to explain what this election was about. It was an anti-incumbent election. Well, no. An awful lot of incumbents got reelected. This election was about one thing. It was about liberty. The entire issue that matters, that has people awakened, is, are we a nation where jobs and economic prosperity are generated by small businesses, by individuals working in a free market to work to achieve their dreams? Or are we a nation where government planners control our economy, control our jobs, and control our lives? There are a lot of specific things that are happening that give us great reason to be encouraged. Just this week, we've seen Republicans in Congress vote to stop the earmarks. That is a tremendous achievement, and one we need to stand by and carry through. Just this week, we saw Senator John Cornyn introduce a resolution in Congress to support a balanced budget amendment that makes it unconstitutional for the federal government to spend more than it receives. We need to get behind and support that to limit the exploding size of our government and protect our liberty. I actually want to point out the young man who led the applause on that. What's your name? Joshua. For good reason, Joshua's leading the applause on that. Because you know what? What President Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid have been doing is spending us into debt and oblivion, which unfortunately Joshua is the one who's going to have to repay. You know, it's an amazing thing. If you go and stop a 5-year-old on the way to kindergarten and you steal his lunch money, they call you a thief and a bully. If you steal the economic future of millions of children throughout this country, they called you Speaker of the House.